Welcome to Left Off the Map and the start of our 4th day here on the beautiful east coast of Tasmania. Freycinet National Park. I can see the hazards if I look through there. I am about, I probably couldn't swim across there, but I'm probably only a few nautical miles away from the hazards, but I wouldn't try swimming there. When we've stayed here in the past, we've seen some abalone and crayfish divers around this area, so I reckon there's an abundance of seafood out there. And we've done lots of seafood while we've been here on the east coast, but today I'm going back to sort of everyone's favourite thing, chicken and chicken satay. Okay, so let's get into it. The first thing, this is the main difference if I was going to do a salmon satay to a chicken satay. The chicken goes in first and we cook that off. We brown the chicken first. If you were doing a salmon satay, you'd put the salmon in at the end once you've made your sauce and allow the sauce to cook it through. So pan on. For a satay, you want butter. Butter and the sort of the peanut sauce, they just marry together a little bit better. So I want 1 knob of butter. My chicken thighs, pop them in. I'm just going to brown them. So I want to cook them off for about 10 minutes until we start getting some really good colour on the outside of that chicken. And once you've got that really good colour, the dish comes together quite quickly from there. So I'm going to give this 10 minutes to brown, then we'll come back and we'll start building up the rest of the dish. So while that's browning, I'm going to dice my red onion, and I'm going to de-seed and dice my tomatoes. My chicken's just getting to the point where it's starting to brown now. So this is probably the last 5 minutes. We've had it in there for 5 minutes, just evaporating a lot of that moisture off to get to a point where we can brown it. Once I dice my onion, I put that in. Once I chop my garlic, I put that in. And once I chop my chilli, I put that in. So that'll continue to cook off for the next 5 minutes. My tomato, I'm going to keep reasonably fresh. So that'll go in basically at the end so that we've got a little bit of freshness to go through the satay sauce. Once I've got my chicken browned and there's some nice caramelisation on the outside, that's when I'll add the remaining ingredients. So 2 spices that I'm going to cook off, cumin and coriander. I've got about 1.5 teaspoons of each. We'll cook those out. And then I've got some peanut butter. Got about 1 cup of peanut butter. And the last thing is my chicken stock. I'm going to let that simmer away for a while, and then I'll finish things off with some lime juice just to freshen it up, and those fresh tomatoes in at the end, and a few of the young picked thyme leaves. We're starting to develop some colour on our chicken. We're getting... So that's the kind of colour that we're after, that really dark colour on the outside of that chicken, because when we add our chicken stock and we start making our sauce, that caramelisation falls off and becomes part of the sauce. So you get it a lot on the bottom of the pan, but you'll also get it on the pieces of chicken themselves. So we're getting pretty close now. One of I think the nicest thing to do in all of Tasmania is to drive from location to location. There's fantastic windy roads. There's great little cafes and cellar doors along the way that you can stop at. During this time of year, during summer, there's little sort of farm stalls and berry stalls, stone fruit stalls on the outside that have an honesty box. You just put in $5 and grab a big bag of nectarines or peaches or some cherries or whatever it is that you want. But I think the best one, or there's probably 3 of my favourites in Tassie. One of those 3 is here on the east coast. It's called the Great Eastern Drive. It goes from Orford down south to St Helens up north. It's about 176 kilometres in length. It takes you about 3 hours because it's quite windy. There's so many cool little spots that are along the way on that trip that you can visit. All right, we've got some good caramelisation. My peanut butter can go in. Give that a stir. My spices, my cumin and my coriander. Cook off those spices, start stirring in that peanut butter. And once I've got that peanut butter mixed reasonably well throughout all the chicken, then I can add my stock. And then it's a matter of just reducing that stock down, because really you've got your satay now. With that peanut butter, you can see that. That's pretty good just on its own. But what we want to do is we want to braise our chicken now. Now we've got some caramelisation on it, we want to braise it and really intensify those flavours as we cook it down. So we'll add in some stock. About a cup of stock. And I'm going to let that bubble away and braise for about 30 minutes. I'll restock with stock if I need to. So we need about 30 minutes now of that bubbling away. All those flavours coming together in that sauce, and that sauce reducing down to be a nice gravy that coats the outside of our chicken. That's just come off the simmer. It was simmering away for about half an hour. Now we can add our fresh tomatoes. So we've got about 5 minutes left of cooking time. So fresh tomatoes in. My lime, juice of 1 lime. I'm just going to bring that simmer back. Simmer it for about 5 minutes. I don't reckon it needs the thyme leaves. I had a taste of it before. I reckon there's enough savoury there, just with that peanut butter. Give that a stir in. Once that comes back to the simmer, I'm going to give it, well, no time really. I'm going to turn that off now. Allow that to cool for 30 seconds, and then we're ready to plate up. I'm not going to add the thyme. I think there's enough savoury there with just the peanut butter. So we'll plate this up, and then head back to the studio kitchen back in Devonport, where I'm going to show you a good family dessert that can go with a family-style dish like this, a rhubarb and apple cobbler. I'm someone who loves desserts, but I like home-style desserts, things like crumbles and cobblers and self-saucing puddings. So I'm going to show you, it's a cobbler, but I'm going to make the batter that goes on top a little bit closer to pancake batter than it is to scone batter, which is what you normally get with a cobbler, so something in between. Trying to make it a little bit lighter, I guess. First thing I want to do is build the fruit that's going to go underneath the cobbler. So I've got rhubarb, which I've chopped into these little battens, about 1 inch, 2.5 centimetres. Pop them in. Then apple. So I want to cut these into sort of bite-sized pieces as well. And these are a sweet apple. If you want a little bit of acidity, you can go with something like a Granny Smith apple, which is going to have a little bit more acidity to it. And I like to keep the skin on because it helps hold the shape or the form of the apple so it doesn't fall apart. Put that in, give it a mix. Apple and rhubarb is a great combination because normally apples are a little bit, well, they're quite sweet unless you use one of those sour apples, and the rhubarb is tart. So the combination of the sweetness of the apple and the tart of the rhubarb works really well. And they're normally things that you can find that are in season together. Right, so my spices, I've got a little bit of cinnamon. There's a teaspoon of cinnamon there. I want to put half of my cinnamon in with the apples and the rhubarb. And I've got some ginger. Same, I've got 2 teaspoons of ginger. I want to put 1 teaspoon in with the apples. And the rest I'll leave for the batter that goes on top. Maple syrup. You don't have to use maple syrup if you don't want to. I'm going to use maple syrup and brown sugar just because I think maple syrup, rhubarb and apple is a really good combination. So it's a flavour thing for me. And then brown sugar. Again, caramel and apples works really well. Now because these are quite sweet apples, I'm not going to need all of this brown sugar. So I'll cook down and be quite sweet. So that was probably 1/4 cup of brown sugar, pinch of salt. And I'm going to put, this is a good little trick, a little bit of lemon just to counteract that sweetness a little bit and just to give it some of that lemon flavour. I like when your fruit stews and the caramel sauce that it's in isn't too runny. Sometimes the fruit lets go of a lot of moisture and it becomes really runny. So just a little sprinkle of flour on that will help thicken your sauce. There we go. Right, so now I can make my batter. Flour, didn't measure that, but I would say about 1.5 to 2 cups. We can add some if we need to. There's no real measurements for this. You might make a bigger tray of cobbler than I do and just adapt it. If you find that you need more flour, then add more flour. If you need more cream, add more cream. Butter. So the old classic sort of scone recipe, a good way to spread the butter out through the flour mixture. Just pinch the flour between your fingers. You'll end up spreading all that butter out amongst the flour. You're just going to do this, so between your fingers, rubbing it through until all of the big lumps of butter are gone, and it'll start to resemble breadcrumbs. And then you know that your butter has been mixed into your flour the way you want it to. Once I get all of that mixed in, I'm going to add a little bit of brown sugar. My leftover spices will go in, and then I'm going to whisk together some cream and an egg, and then we'll add that cream and egg mixture until I get this to the consistency that I want, which is a thick, almost a thick pancake mixture. So I've got my wet and my dry ingredients ready to go. So I can add in the wet, probably 3/4 of that, just so I can adjust it if I need to. Mix all that together. So that was 1.5 cups of cream and 2 eggs. All right, I reckon I'm going to need 1/4 cup of milk. I want to be able to dollop this mixture onto what I've got there. Right, so we ended up with about 2 cups. So that's now getting to a sort of a thick hot cake or pancake consistency, which is what I want. So I can pop this on top of my apples. This is going to go into an oven about anywhere between 160 and 180, so 170 and 75 for about 35 to 40 minutes. Until all we're really wanting here is for the batter on top to be cooked through. So when you can put a skewer in and it comes out clean, then you know it's done. Apple and rhubarb are one of those great combinations. I think if you put them in a cobbler or a pie or anything like that, even with a little bit of custard just on their own, it's a fantastic combination. Now, we're back on the East Coast, another cracking, beautiful, gorgeous day down here. Everything we're using here is basically cured or preserved for this pasta. So we've got some pancetta and some salami, so 2 cured meats that if you've got in your fridge will stay there for a while and you think, oh, what do I do with the last few slices of salami or the last few slices of pancetta? Sun-dried tomatoes. Most people have got a jar or a container of sun-dried tomatoes in their fridge. And then passata. So just a jar of tomato puree, or you could have tomato paste or tinned tomatoes. Everyone's pretty much got something like that in their fridge. I'm going to bring them all together and make a bit of a really basic cream tomato-based sauce and then add our pasta on top of it. So with these, with the sort of leftover, this is like 3 or 4 slices and 4 or 5 slices of our salami. It's just enough to break them down so that they can go into our little food processor. So just into sort of 2 centimetre pieces, 2 centimetre dice. So we'll pop that in. I'm gonna make a mince out of those leftover. If you had bacon, you've got some leftover bacon in the fridge, you can do that. Then I'm gonna add, same sort of thing, I'm gonna chop up our sun-dried tomatoes, just roughly chop those. And then pop them in there as well, so that'll become part of our mince. So I'll pop all of our chopped sun-dried tomato in as well. Then we'll put our lid on. I'm gonna blitz that up to make our mince paste. Put a little bit of oil in there as well, just to help loosen it up. Lid on. All right, so we've got this beautiful mince. So you can see that in there. This awesome sort of mixture of our minced sun-dried tomatoes, our minced salami, and our minced pancetta. Like I said, if you've got cabana, bacon, cabanossi, any of those sorts of things, throw them in and break them up as well. Okay, we start getting our pan ready or to make our sauce. My pasta is cooking inside on the stovetop, so I'm using the penne. And then I'll add that pasta to our sauce at the end, bringing some of that pasta water over so it'll help thicken our sauce up a little bit. A little bit of oil. Pop in our mince. So I'm gonna set that on a low temperature and just bring that heat in, start rendering some of that out and start cooking it off. And then I'm gonna add, once I've got that, I'm gonna add in my tomato passata, which is this here, just our tomato puree. I'm gonna reduce that right down by about half, I reckon, and then I'll taste it and make sure it's got all the salt that I want. Once I'm happy with that, I'm gonna add as much cream as I need to add to get the balance right between the acidity of the tomato and the creaminess of the cream. Once I'm happy with that, then we'll put our pasta on top. So we give this a few more minutes, add in my passata and reduce that down. So I've reduced that passata down to what's almost now, it's fairly similar to a tapenade, is what you'd say. So I'm gonna add in some of my cream. I wanna add about half of this. I don't want too much. Stir that in. All right. Let's give that a taste. Probably a little bit more cream. So I might just let that tick away and simmer for about 5 minutes, and then I'll bring my pasta out. I've mixed all of my pasta in there and put a fair bit of pasta water in there just to thicken any of the wet pools that were going to be in that sauce. Will have now sort of soaked up that starch and will be nice and thick. Add some black pepper. You shouldn't need much salt just because the cured things that we put in there are going to be quite salty on their own. So now, put it together. You can see how much this makes. Once you break down that sun-dried tomato, those cured meats, there's so much flavour in there that it goes a long way out of it. So there's enough pasta here that you could feed 4 people happily, even probably 6, off really not a lot that was left over in your fridge. It's just using all of those really intense ingredients like the sun-dried tomato, the salami and the pancetta to drive the flavours through the pasta so it stretches a long way. And it's just even if you didn't have those things in your cupboard, this is a pasta worth going out and buying them. And buy some nice salami, buy some nice speck, buy some good sun-dried tomatoes, because they'll go even further on and it'll just increase the quality and the flavour in the dish. We've jumped around a bit today. We started off with satay, then we went to a dessert in the Cobbler, and finishing off with a very, very Italian penne. But I think 3 awesome standalone recipes. But if you wanted to put them together, this pasta you could have for lunch, satay you could have for dinner, and the Cobbler could be dessert.